I just want, I mean, if for 360, we have 365 days, if for one day out of 365 days, we're able to set our troubles aside and we're able to appreciate the fact that we're Nigerians, how do you think that any government, any, government, be they at the federal or state or local government, how can they build on that enthusiasm to ensure that they are able to, lead the people in the direction which they want them to look?
I think it's a function of leadership. We need to deliver service ultimately to nearly 200 million Nigerians scattered in all the 36 states of this country. And sometimes I think that we blame the center too much. A lot are happening in the states. All of these nearly 200 million Nigerians I spoke about are disaggregated in all the 36 states. And so there are very serious developmental responsibilities on the shoulders of state governors and local government chairmen. We don't see, corresponding attention being put in terms of scrutinizing state administrations.
And why is that so?
I think it is because there is so much attention at the center. Does the center have a lot of power? Yes. Do we always focus on the center in order to make sure that we hold them responsible? Yes, I think there is a far more robust checks and balances at the center. But we don't have anything near that in the states. I think it was in the papers some few days ago when the former president, Obasanjo, was saying that the state governors are in fact more powerful than the president. I think that is correct because, you see, if you look at what happens in the states, they do have a great deal of responsibility. But do we have, that kind of responsibility discharged? We don't see that. And yet we don't have that kind of scrutinizing, that kind of scrutiny happening at the state levels. I think that if we devolve, more powers to the states, it's not going to lead automatically to good governance. We need to make sure, we build institutions of good governance, and that can only happen when there are, when there's an increase in the social consciousness of our people. We have, unfortunately, over the past 57 years, basically ritualized administration and governance. What we've done is to wait. Every 4 years of the electoral cycle, we vote for those who either worship the same God with us or worship in the same church or mosque, or they have the same names as us. And then as soon as we have cast the vote, we just fall back and wait for the next 4 years. Democracy doesn't work that way. We need to make sure that the moment the leaders have been chosen, we build the institutions through civil society networking to make sure that we hold leaders to account at all levels, not just, this kind of attention we put at the center. Should we devolve powers? Yes, to the states, but should we have structures that will then hold state governors, local government administrators accountable? We don't have that kind of attention. I think because of the fragility of our checks and balances in the country, we should focus more attention on what is happening in the state. A lot of resources there. Are we getting proportionate amount of development? By no means.
But when you say we should pay more attention to what's going on in the states, let's look at what one of the things the president talked about in his speech. He talked about the war against corruption and how much the government has been able to achieve. He talked about the National Assembly beginning to pass laws real quick, also that this can happen. Now, recently, the Chief Justice of Nigeria gave a directive that special courts should be set up to handle corruption cases. Do you think this kind of directive can also be applied in the states? I mean, if the assemblies are said to be in the pockets of the governors, and the local government chairmen are said to be in the pockets of the governors, can the judiciary, in your opinion, help to make any difference in the states?
Yes, I think so. But the matters will first of all have to go to the courts. And who will take it there? The state governments have very strong institutions that ought to do that. Are they doing that? I don't think so. I mean, look, when you have a state governor, the government answers to the assembly and answers to the people of the state, not to the Inspector General of Police, not to the President, not to the Chief Justice of the country. The Constitution is very clear. The state governors answer directly to the people through the state assemblies. And if you go to all of these state assemblies across the country, do you have, those kind of checks and balances, the kind of separation of powers that we should have. By no means. By no means. So if you devolve more powers to these kind of centers, across the country, I'm afraid that you're not going to get the kind of, development we are seeking, because it's not enough simply to have more powers. What do you do with that? How much development are you driving to the communities? So that is the problem. It's not so much about restructuring, devolving more powers to the states. Nyota, I don't know if you remember this song in the 80s, by a group, I think called Third World. Now that you found love, what do you want to do with it? The same thing. If you devolve more powers, to the states, what are they going to do with it? As I speak now, there are some state governments that already have budgets bigger than, the budgets of some African countries. What are they doing? Go to some of these states and see the extent of suffering. Go to some of these communities and see the extent, of deprivation. So if you devolve more powers to these state administrations, do we have corresponding checks and balances? Do we have, accountability? Do we have more responsibility discharged? I don't think that's going to happen automatically until we build alternative centers of power in civil society. To do that, you need to raise the level of social consciousness of our people. Talking about social consciousness and the power of the people, how much of responsibility can the individual citizen take when it comes to this? When the president was rounding off his speech, he talked about all Nigerians joining hands, especially in the war against corruption. How much of responsibility can an individual citizen take? I think it's a function of education. Someone who, someone who is not properly aware of their citizenship rights and responsibilities can't rise to the challenge of full citizenship responsibilities. They also need a high level of education. But you see, two things are happening in this country. The first is economic disempowerment. A lot of people are unemployed. A lot of people are underemployed. There are so many people who are educationally, who are economically disadvantaged. So every day they are lost in this circle. How do I pay rent? How do I pay school fees? They are more interested in some of these basic concerns that turn out to be life and death struggles for them. So notions of democracy, accountability, transparency appear to be abstract notions to them. And so we need to build the economic, the economic base of our people so that they will be able to afford some of the most basic things and then pay attention to issues of accountability and good governance. That's number one. Number two, we need to raise civic education, civic awareness. But when I talk about education, I'm not talking about it in terms of certification and credentialism. No, I'm talking about in terms of general awareness of the environment, knowing that those who are in government are able to deliver service to you, not as a favor, but as a matter of right. Okay, the tendency is that more and more people...
Tam-George, yes. I'm afraid we really have to go. Thank you so much for coming to share your thoughts with us. We've been speaking with Dr. Austin Tam-George, a communication and media consultant and former Commissioner for Information in Rivers State. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment. Please don't go away.